Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast Network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast. Ozcast. Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
John Bruni, Happy New Year. How are you?
Happy New Year to you too, Jeremy, and to everyone around the table this morning.
Yep.
Morning, John.
Hi, John.
Morning, hi.
Did you have a good Christmas and New Year and all of that?
Yes, spectacular. Thank you very much. It was really great.
Yeah. No rest for the wicked, though, John, in your field.
No rest for the wicked. I mean, honestly, my idea of fun is just to peruse the YouTube channels and find out what other horror show there's out there waiting for us.
Well, since President Trump became president, I said I think
You got to stutter, Jeremy.
No,
I'm just choking.
I got to be careful because I've got people around this table, John, who are very pro-Trump and people who are very anti-Trump, and I just really think he's a very interesting character, bull in a china shop, unpredictable. Yeah. But he seems to get things done. I think it's probably because people are scared of what he
gets
just
the wrong
might.
things done.
well, Jeremy, let's pick up on what you've just said. Okay, so he seems to get things done.
Yeah.
Trump thrives on the perception of doing stuff. He is a wrecking ball. He is disruptive. I mean, we only have to look at some of the insane policy pronouncements he put forward. Let's just take one, for instance. Let's take the issue of Gaza. Now, the idea of ethnically cleansing Gaza is not a new idea, but it used to be something that was held among the crazy lot of the extreme right-wing religious Israelis in the Knesset. You know, Benjamin Netanyahu's staunch allies. Now it's become normalized because Trump made the announcement that he's going to turn the Gaza Gaza Strip into the Middle Eastern Riviera. So I was watching Jimmy Kimmel the other day, and I do like some of the barbs that get thrown around, and he said, to the Riviera, to the sea. So Trump is going to turn. So Trump is going to now turn the Gaza Strip, which is basically a bombed-out hellhole, into what we would expect and what we would have anticipated and hoped that the Gazans themselves would have done, and that is build the place into paradise on earth.
But a nice casino there or something.
Yeah, Kushner condos, Trump Towers, the whole lot, you know. But the one thing that we tend to forget when we're looking at a place like Gaza, where is the material to come from? Where are the resources? The Gazans never had a chance to begin with regard to reconstructing Gaza. I mean, firstly, there was the issue of Hamas. Then there was the issue of the Israelis boxing in the entirety of Gaza. There are no resources that they can easily tap in that tiny strip of territory to actually build anything. So whatever they had has now been destroyed by the Israelis. My question then is, okay, so Trump's solution, let him go to Egypt, let him go to Jordan. But if anyone knows anything about the Middle East, they'll also know that the Arabs are not like some monolithic, harmonious family that love each other and love their brothers. They kill their brothers as viciously as the Israelis have been, mowing their way through the West Bank and Gaza. So let's just pause there for a moment and say, well, how workable is this idea? Well, I don't think under current circumstances it's workable at all. I mean, you've noticed now that most Arab leaderships have now said that this is unacceptable and we won't do it. Now, there are other people out there who say, but, John, you don't understand. Trump's a wrecking ball, but, it's all about, a better positioning. It's opening the negotiations. Yeah, and I would answer that with negotiating for what exactly? What is the end point? We're led to believe now that Trump has backed Netanyahu's notion of clearing out Gaza of all Palestinians. The next domino to fall, obviously, will be the West Bank, where Israeli settlers are doing their level best to make life uncomfortable for the remaining Palestinian communities. Does the United States really want to get involved in this sort of fight where encouraging the Israelis, I'll take a step back. We're not encouraging the Israelis. We're encouraging Netanyahu and his acolytes to go absolutely crazy and develop their version of a greater Israel. Will it make Israel safer? In the short term, probably. In the long term, absolutely not, because all those radicalized, resentful people who have just been forced out of their homes after they've been blown up, they're not going to be sitting in a neighboring Arab state thinking, well, this is the best that we can ever sort of accomplish for ourselves. So let's just sit here and enjoy the life that Trump has given us. No, this is going to accelerate anti-Semitism. This is going to accelerate anti-Americanism, and this is going to make the Middle East a deeply unstable country in the medium to long term.
Seeing as it's been going on for I don't know how many thousands of years, why would President Trump even be interested in discussing this hellhole? Why not? Wouldn't it be smarter policy or politics just to ignore it, leave it alone, let them stew in their own juice?
Well, look, honestly, Jeremy, I think that that's probably the only solution there is. I mean, the more the foreigners try to sort of read the tea leaves, actively participate on the ground, the more likely things are going to go backside up. And they have, and they continue to do so. But we are very weak on learning lessons. Now, the only one that has a coherent agenda in the entire Middle East is Netanyahu and his acolytes, and that is the creation of a greater Israel, where Israel isn't a pluralistic democracy. It's an ethnically and religiously devout Jewish state. Now, people on the Jewish side of the equation, some will say this is a great idea because if we have a homogeneous Jewish entity and we don't have to worry about dealing with the Palestinians inside our own borders, we're all going to be much safer and more secure.
Yeah.
But as weapons technologies evolve and proliferate, the likelihood of Jordanians who themselves are suffering from overpopulation by Palestinians that had been displaced through the Israeli-Arab wars in the 20th century, the likelihood of the Jordanian kingdom surviving an influx of new radicalized Palestinians is very slim. And the Egyptians themselves have got their own internal problems, and their ability to sort of integrate a hostile population of Palestinians is not great either. So that kind of instability that we are talking about now will become fact in the not too distant future if Trump were true with regard to what he's saying. Now, we don't know whether he is or not. It could be the opening of some sort of negotiation. But again, my question is, what negotiation? What sort of peace are they going to put on the table?
Who is he going to negotiate with?
Oh, he doesn't want to negotiate with any Palestinian, as far as I can see. The only negotiation is with the Israeli government.
Yeah. And not one in mention of who's going to pay for this Riviera. Why would the Americans want to do that? They already give Jordan, I think it's 400 or 500 million a year in aid, and a similar amount goes off to Egypt. So those two countries, I imagine he would have a bit of sway with them because they wouldn't want to lose that advantage, financial advantage. So I guess they've got to tread pretty carefully with Trump.
I'll put my two bobs worth in, if I may. As you wouldn't be surprised about that. 100 years of conflict in the Middle East, 20 years of Hamas being the leadership in Gaza. The average age of the population in Gaza is 23, so the kids there are obviously only thinking one way. Yes, John, I agree with you about YouTube. The amount of video footage showing the bombing, the devastation, and the unrecognisable state of that territory now. And Trump's quite right. What are all those people marching along the beach in convoy? What are they marching back to? They certainly won't be marching back to home sweet home the way it was. And if they've got to even have a roof over their head. So it's a massive humanitarian disaster. And ideally you would say that the world is very sympathetic and will rehouse these people in neighbouring countries. But we know, we know the territorial nature, as you say, of these people and the deep-seated hatred towards one another that Egypt, Syria, and you name it, they're not going to, well, let's say Jordan and Egypt in particular, they have already said 15, 16 months ago that they won't take in these refugees. Australia was going to take in 800, now Albanese is going to take in 3,000. And even those people coming to Australia isn't an ideal fit into our democratic society, given our, closeness to the United States in terms of policy and all that. So, and, you know, the Israeli people who live here in Australia, the anti-Semitism has been obviously overtly displayed over the last 15 months, and the government's done nothing to curtail that and stop that.
They can't. They'll lose those western suburbs.
Well, that's their predicament. But the reality is, from a true humanitarian conscious issue,
Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast. Ozcast. Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
Should be not allowing anti-Semitism to fester and develop in a country like ours.
John, is the two-state proposition dead?
Yes. Yeah. It has been for quite some time. And this is one of the great illusions that have been peddled around in international relations for quite some time, that there is still an idea that a two-state solution can come from this. The Israelis don't want one, or at least the Netanyahu government certainly doesn't want one. The only real solution to anything is to turn Israel into a much larger entity, but one that includes an Arab-speaking population. The problem, of course, being, as Les had just intimated, you know, the Palestinian population is young, it's fertile, and it's growing at a rate of knots. So demographically, if you were to formalize a treaty whereby Gazans and West Bank settlers, you know, of Palestinian origin, were to join the Israeli state and become technically Israeli citizens, you know, the demographics would swing against away from the Jewish majority and toward the incoming Palestinian majority. And so therefore you're going to end up having ethnic tensions and sectarian problems and political problems as a consequence of that. So what to do? Thinking outside of the box, I suppose Trump is doing just that, right? Thinking outside of the box. But the only thing that stands in the way here of ethnically clearing out a particular territory. Now, we've seen this before. We've seen it with the likes of Slobodan Milosevic in Yugoslavia. We've seen it with Saddam Hussein in Iraq. Is this truly what we think is out-of-the-box thinking, or are we setting ourselves up for a humanitarian disaster where blood will be firmly in our hands and there's nothing that we can do about it?
No,
I guess, look, John, it distills, in my view, back to leadership. And the leadership of that territory, as I said, 20 years of a terrorist organisation running a population, and then the world recognising that they needed assistance, ploughing billions of dollars into funding a better life for the people of Gaza. What did Hamas do with it? Instead of building upwards and building new hospitals and building new facilities for the population, they were building tunnels underground and creating a haven for their terrorist organisation. And that's what the Israelis want to rout out, that terrorist organisation.
Sure.
And here in Australia we have, and around the world, a lot of sympathy, and even the United Nations seems to be more sympathetic to a terrorist organisation. That we're not talking about a pseudo-terrorist organisation. We're talking about a recognised terrorist organisation, and Hamas is only one of the terrorist organisations that operate, as you know better than I do, in the region, and they've been allowed to precipitate their bad behaviour. And in the end of the day, I would say to you that, you know, Trump seems to be an interesting, as Jeremy points out, an interesting character with interesting thoughts, interesting ideas, and a different way of looking through the prism that most politicians would do. And probably he's not being a leader like a normal or usual, what we expect as a politician, quite different. And it's like his attitude towards the Panama Canal. I mean, people were thinking he wants to run the Panama Canal. Well, it was nothing off the truth. That was the left-leaning legacy media saying that. All Trump wanted to do was prevent the Chinese controlling the Panama Canal. And the people who do control the Panama Canal have now severed their connections with the Chinese, as you know. So that's all Trump wanted to achieve, not to run it. He just said, I don't want the Chinese to run it. And you can imagine what would happen.
So basically, Les, what I'm hearing from you is that Trump's maximalist pressure on the world. I mean, we're just not talking about Gaza here. We're talking about Panama. We're talking about Denmark. We're talking about Canada. We're talking about Colombia. It's working, and it's spectacularly working, because basically whatever Trump wants, which again is whatever Trump wants, we don't know what the American people want. But if whatever Trump wants, he gets because he uses standover tactics and breaks diplomatic protocol wherever he goes, this somehow is going to be a world in which America is first, but first in the same way that a bully is first on the school ground because he keeps on beating up on you. I tend to think we're looking at a world where things are going to get from crazy to batshit. You know, it's going to go even worse than we can possibly imagine, because understand, the international order after World War II was put into place to prevent war from happening. At the moment, Trump has been in there for what, 3-4 weeks now? Yeah. He has now done so much damage to the international order. In order for him to position America better, he tends to forget America is not in a vacuum. And other countries, you know, they may not go head-to-head with the United States because they know they'll lose. But what they will do, especially American allies, because, you know, the ironic thing about the Trump administration is that China is the big threat. Who's the first person he throws under the bus? The Canadians, the Danish people, or the Greenlanders, the Panamanians, and the Colombians. Those were key American allies in their respective regions, and he went after them first. What about the Chinese? Oh, well, he put 10% tariffs on. 10% tariffs are okay for China. They can absorb that. That's not a big deal. The Chinese were expecting the 25% tariffs. That may have been a bit different. But now that everything has been turned over, there's going to be this passive-aggressive response from the rest of the world. You do unto me, I will do back to you, and you won't see it coming. That is going to lead us back to where we were in the 19th century. I don't know whether or not that was a perfect social order. I know that some people like imperialism. Vladimir Putin seems to like it very much. Yep. So I'm wondering what he's thinking of in the Kremlin. I mean, I'm sure he's chortling away thinking everything that we set out to do to unseat the West is happening by the hand of the American president. I mean, where are we here?
I've been a great one to advocate for any new leader in the world today to be a pragmatist, to be hard, stick to your convictions, stick to your policy, and get on with the job instead of being lily-livered and weak and insipid. Like our present Prime Minister, I think he's just a bad Prime Minister and probably one of the worst.
Look, honestly, put my political hat on for a moment, Les. I agree with you, and I think that the one good or positive thing that has come out of what we're seeing at the moment is a pushback against that sort of behavior from a political perspective. But I think there's also an element of be careful for what you wish for, because it might come true. With all of this comes the chaos that we have to get used to and normalize in our own mindsets. In an information-rich environment where the truth is no longer solid or it's no longer obvious, people now will be able to get away with things that they haven't been able to get away with for decades, if not centuries. This is not the kind of thing that we ought to have. I agree that we needed better leadership. Here in Australia, we don't have any good leadership, and I'd say, you know, there's a pox on both sides of the house here in terms of leadership. But, you know, that's just my cynical observation about things. But to get better leadership is a different sort of discussion from seeing chaos reign. That's the problem that I have with what we're seeing at the moment.
You're right in the context, but in the context of the period of our lifetimes, our natural lifetimes, we've seen the world gone from quite a better orderly state in terms of culture, family values, people's behaviour, law and order, people's disposable incomes. There's been a massive collapse, particularly in the Western world, all at the benefit of the other side of the planet, particularly the Asian world, because they are progressing at a great rate of knots, particularly with energy. They're using cheap energy to advance like we did, and we're now paying the penalty for that. There's been some, a lot of weakness and a lot of, probably in my mind, not very good decision making, and particularly overlaid with this social engineering, which the DEI principles have pervaded into our Western world to our detriment. And, people aren't going to necessarily complain or ridicule Trump for saying that we shouldn't allow men to participate in women's sport, or we shouldn't allow men into female toilets.
I agree. I agree with all of that.
What I'm saying to you, John, is if I may conclude by saying, yes, Trump is a bull in the china shop. Yes, there's going to be some breakages. Yes, we have to readjust. But I think there's a great deal to be said about some of the policies that Trump has, and also I might say other more right of centre leaders who have come into into Europe, because there's been a trend in Europe for the left-leaning powers to be put out by the public, because the public is just fed up with the way they're being governed. And now there's a change. There's a movement around the planet for more conservative, if not to the right of conservatism politics. And I think it's part of the evolution of the planet.
Well, look, there is a thing in physics called entropy, and entropy says that everything has a life expectancy, and maybe the West has come to that end of its life expectancy, and now we're going to go into a chrysalis period and develop a butterfly at the end. I don't know. But if we look at what you've said, a lot of the stuff I agree with, Les. There's no doubt that we've had a deficit in political leadership across cultures, across countries. But it's never as simple as one would like. In reality, the idea of letting the bull out to disrupt everything, and not even disrupt, but break stuff, that stuff is not going to come back once it's broken. And that's the stuff that we grew up understanding is going to be with us for the rest of our life, and probably for our children's lives as well. And we're not talking about just social and political stability. We're talking about economic stability. I mean, just imagine Elon Musk has sent a bunch of kids into the US Treasury and basically is playing with the coding. Yeah. Now, Musk is not an elected official. He's been put into his position by Trump, right? So the US president seems to have said, well, okay, Trump's a good guy, so let's give him the treasury and see what happens. We don't know how this is going to play out, but many people are suggesting that perhaps this is a step too far. I mean, even Trump supporters, even MAGA supporters are saying, well, what the hell is Musk doing with the bloody US treasury? Wasn't that meant to be sacrosanct? If he starts screwing around with that, the internal payment system of many Americans working in government agencies to deliver goods to MAGA supporters, mostly from the Rust Belt states, that's all going to disappear. So is this how Elon Musk is going to take care of the $2 trillion he wants to claw back from the US budget? Question mark, right? So, I mean, again, you've got all this out-of-the-box thinking, but what are you wanting to achieve? And I still think we're very much in a deficit. And getting back to Europe, for instance, I mean, again, lack of proper leadership. But on the other side of the equation is that America and the American dominance of Europe from a social political perspective post-World War II was important to stabilize Europe, because Europe doesn't have, I mean, I'm talking about the continent, not Britain. The continent of Europe doesn't have a democratic tradition per se. That only grew up after World War II. You take the Americans or weaken the American presence in Europe, whether deliberately or not, Europe is going to plunge back into its extremist form. Europe only knows two extremes, right? Communism and fascism. That's it. So if you think that it's a thing to celebrate, to see the alternative for Deutschland or for Germany move up the ranks, and that somehow this is a good thing for Germany, well, for those people who want to see the Wehrmacht rebuilt, maybe, I don't know. Yeah. For those people who are really concerned about the fact that you're unleashing anti-democratic forces on the continent once again, and then we have to deal with the repercussions of that, that could be a long-term problem, right? Similarly, the National Front in France. Great that Marine Le Pen is doing whatever she's doing. If she gets into power in Paris, what do you think the future of France is going to be like? The only person that I would say in the European context who's played it very smart up to now is Giorgia Meloni in Italy. Now, she's a fascist by all intents and purposes, But she actually defied expectation by getting in and governing Italy sensibly. For the first time in its post-war history, it's not looking too shabby at the moment.
Yeah. How many governments have they had in Italy since the Second World War?
I think it's post the 50, past 50. The 50 mark. It's ridiculous. But look, Maloney has stabilised things.
It's very democratic, John. Everybody gets to be prime minister. It works out well.
Yes.
Now listen. I've got one last question for you. The Premier of New South Wales was briefed on the terrorist. What's that? It's Tony's having a biscuit.
Oh,
could you do it quietly, Tony? The Premier was briefed on the terrorist attack or the possible terrorist attack at Dural in New South Wales, and the Prime Minister wasn't. Do you think there's anything significant or sinister in that?
I don't know. I see sinister in almost anything in politics these days. I mean, the one thing that I will say about that sort of whole terrorism notion, and in a multicultural setting, because don't forget, we're still a multicultural country, right?
Yeah.
And by multicultural, I'm talking about the ideology, not the fact.
Yeah.
So as a multicultural state, our politicians, and Albo's in a very bad position right now, but Dutton will be in a similar position soon enough if he wins. So the thing is that they're going to have to balance Muslim Australians, Palestinian Australians with Jewish Australians. Now, let me explain the difference between the two. These two groups are mutually hostile, and they're dealt by the Australian government in separate ways, because whoever happens to be in charge of a particular seat for a particular party will try to play the ethnic card. I'm from Western Sydney. I like Lebanese. I go and eat Lebanese food, so therefore vote for me. I'm in Melbourne, in inner city Melbourne. I enjoy Jewish food. I go to Jewish restaurants and everything's fine. That's how we play politics here, and it's not a good thing.
Yeah. Okay.
Because everyone is now held hostage to this rubbish.
All right, dear friend, have a good week, and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you very much for coming on the show.
See you, John.
Thank you.
Dr.
Bye.
John Bruni, ladies and gentlemen, from Sage International.
Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast.
Ozcast.
Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.